Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the Inside Scoop. My name is Alpha Woolen, and I am your host for this evening. Did you know that 30 to 40% of Americans, men and women, will experience domestic violence? Did you also know that in September of this year, the Biden administration commemorated the 30-year anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act? So tonight we are going to talk about an organization that is based in Buffalo, New York, but is establishing roots here in the DMV area called the Bury the Violence Organization. And we have with us its founder, Karima Morris. Karima, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the Bury the Violence Organization. How did it come about? How did it become your brainchild?
So the organization started in 2013. We learned a lot about children in the missing space. My niece was 13 years old. She had went missing. And I told my sister, it was a Sunday morning, I said, you need to go to the police station. All of her belongings are at home, her favorites. You need to file a missing person report. We found out then it wasn't a thing when they basically said she's a runaway, and they left us to our own vices to figure it out.
They being law enforcement?
Law enforcement,
okay.
Our Buffalo Police Department. And so we took the initiative to go into the community, door to door, social media, passing out flyers, whatever it took to figure out where my niece Lanasia was at 13 years old.
Wow.
So she was located deceased.
Oh.
After the police, after I was contacted by a former politician to tell me that I had to stop interrupting the community with entering homes and things like that without permission.
So an elected official told you that you had to stop entering. You were looking for your needs.
Absolutely.
So you were going into empty homes or?
Spaces that youth would be at.
Okay.
Kickbacks, as they call it.
Okay.
You know, where kids hang out.
Okay.
Whatever it took.
So you felt like you had to take matters into your own hands.
And we did.
Okay.
Yes.
And then unfortunately it ended in tragedy.
Yes, I told them that I'll give them 24 hours. And in the 23rd hour, a community member reached out to us and let us know it was yellow tape in the same space we thought she was at. The whole time we knew where she was, we just didn't know she was dead.
Oh my gosh. And so that's what made you birth Bury the Violence.
Yes.
Wow. So as a help for other people who...
We never want anyone to go through what we went through. We started out as Lanasia Rose Foundation, and that was cute, basketball, games, and things like that. But people were calling me to say, hey, my daughter was murdered. I need you to tell me who did it. Hey, I have another child missing. We need your help. And then they just kept pulling and tugging, and it went from missing and murdered to no law enforcement involvement. They just called me because we need to get it out in front of people in the community, because every minute counts when someone is missing. And we do missing and murdered because she was murdered. So it left us open to that space to operate however, because we had now the experience off of that situation.
I find it really interesting that you mentioned that you did engage law enforcement, but you said that their response was because she was a runaway, or
Yep.
How did they even come to that conclusion? Why was that even a parameter?
So we turned the fire.
Yep.
Stirred
Law
it,
enforcement
turned
has
it again.
they have the choice to look for a child that's missing. And if that officer decides that that child is a runaway, they don't have to do anything but label them as a runaway. Furthermore, they also have the discretionary options to use 40% less of the resources when a child is missing. So they mark them as runaway, and they don't have to do anything.
Wow. So in your organization, what are some of the common demographics or common characteristics of a missing person story that will come your way?
Black and brown youth that are in marginalized populations. They're vulnerable. They're in situations where they can, you're outside without your parents, so you don't have your needs, right? So there's people here to meet your needs when you come on this side and there's no adults. So we know that sometimes law enforcement also decides that if they had any activity or involvement, maybe a Kia kid, as they call them, or things like that.
For the sake of our audience, what is a Kia kid?
So Kia boys, they steal Kias in our areas. It's still happening to this day. It was a TikTok challenge that has not ended for us yet.
Oh my gosh.
So you have Kia boys, Kia girls, and those kids are often monitored by law enforcement, whether we know it or not, and they end up missing. And as a parent, you think your child's missing, but you don't know the activity or the monitoring that's being done.
Wow.
So they generally won't look for that child. So we have to keep that child visible in the front of the community to let them know that the parent does not know where this child is, that the parent is looking for the child. And you have kids that come up and say, I'm not missing, but you're not at home and your parent doesn't know where you're at, right? And ultimately, if we do not advocate for our youth, and if we don't get them out there and in front of everybody, you could walk past a kid at Target, at the gas station, on the train station, and not know they were missing because you never seen anything to say this child is missing and their parents looking for them.
So we do have the Kia boys and the Kia girls. We have that here in the Washington, D.C. area as well. It's definitely a problem. As a matter of fact, one of my good friends, I just had dinner with her on Saturday. She and her husband had their car stolen a month ago. It was a Kia. So, and they found it a couple days ago. It was terrible, it's awful condition. But when we have these issues in this area, specifically in the DMV area, one of the first questions that people say is, where are the parents? We want to hold the parents accountable. Are you finding that you encounter that question as well? And then if so, then what's going on in the mind of the parent?
From the very beginning, that was one of the questions we heard when my niece went missing and was not actually a runaway. And they're like, where are the parents? You got to remember, you were a youth as well. Nobody laid in front of the door. Nobody, pinned up the windows to make sure you didn't go anywhere. Sometimes parents actually don't know. There is a thing where if the school calls and the child is not at homeroom, you don't get that notification as a parent because the number of the school or the attendance office is blocked. So they don't even have knowledge that the kids are in school.
Wow.
So, we have to remember that children are brilliant. And if we really give them the opportunity to create these spaces and networks to do whatever it is that they're doing, they do it. And so the parents are at home sometimes, often really unaware of what's going on. And then you have children that have repeat situations where they may have already had this involvement. We hold restorative circles. We try to help the parents to figure out what, we bridge the gap in services so they know what's available, who can help, and how they can be helped, or if they can be helped, to avoid them going to jail. And that's just part of the problem. We have to work together as a community, not use the parents as a punching bag, and understand that some of them really just don't know that their children are involved in these situations.
When you find the children, where are they normally or usually?
It's a wide range of options when it comes to that, because you have vulnerable youth that are out here. And one thing about a missing persons flyer is it tells the people who really want to help that this kid is missing, but it also tells those people who prey on vulnerable people, hey, there's nobody that knows the whereabouts of this child.
Right.
And they end up murdered.
Oh my gosh. So your organization, Bury the Violence, so how did you get from helping your niece to saying, okay, we need a group of people that will focus on this specifically in Buffalo, New York?
So it went from, we had a very rough experience in the midst of loss, right? And so I was angry, and sometimes I probably still feel that same way for years, to the point where I'd rather see myself out there taking a risk to get the children home. And often, you know, again, this was my sister's daughter. My sister did not have the capacity to come out into the community and do what I was doing. She wasn't running up on, you know, men on the corner, you know, that we know the occupation. She wasn't doing that. She was in the car praying. So I have to understand that there's other parents that don't have the capacity to come out and do that. And so we made ourselves readily available to go just as hard when law enforcement wouldn't. We do have to work with them. We don't work against them, but what they didn't do, we did do.
Wow.
So we interjected in the spaces where we knew what was really going on. And when I say missing, runaway, trafficked, and exploited children, it was because when we went to look in those spaces, I was greeted with, "Hey, have you seen my niece? She's 13 years old." And the response was, "Oh, that's 2 o'clock." And 2 o'clock to me didn't click until maybe the fifth man said, "That's 2 o'clock." And I said, "What's 2 o'clock? That's LaNasia." And it was, "No, that's the time she comes out to work."
Oh my gosh. Wow. And so those were the circumstances you found your niece in. She'd been murdered in that. Oh my gosh, that's heartbreaking.
So again, the parents sometimes genuinely don't know, and we are very close-knit when it comes to the children. If nothing else, the children are going to be protected. And we didn't have a chance to. We didn't know she was out there.
Right. And so now you said, you know what? It's not going to stop at LaNasia. I'm going to help as many kids as possible.
Absolutely.
And you have parents now, if they feel like they are not going to get any help from law enforcement,
Right.
they know they can get help from BTV.
Absolutely, because the first reaction, if your child goes missing, what are you going to do? You're going to call police. It's not really the answer.
Oh my gosh, that's really frustrating. Wow. Well, we're going to continue this conversation in our next segment. That's really heartbreaking. Please make sure you don't go anywhere as we continue our conversation with Karima Morris, who's the founder of Bury the Violence, Violence Interrupter kind of program, based in New York, and they're going to establish roots here in the DMV area. So don't go anywhere. Stay seated for these PSAs. We'll see you in 1 second.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. Already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean,
Right.
like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for joining us back here on the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Alpha Woolen, and we are going to continue our conversation with Karima Morris. She's the founder of Bury the Violence Foundation, rooted in Buffalo, New York, but they're establishing satellite programs here in the DMV. And so when we left off, we were talking about the heartbeat behind BTV, Bury the Violence, and that was your niece who was found, unfortunately, she was found murdered, Lanasia. And the frustration you and your family experienced when you reached out to law enforcement and they weren't giving you the care and the resources that you deserved. So,
Yes.
yeah. So you mentioned earlier in the segment that there was an elected official that reached out to you and said that he or she was trying to interrupt you finding justice for your family. Has your relationship with that elected official changed at all, or?
I have to ultimately work right with everybody in those spaces. So, yes, we kept a cordial relationship, but I don't know, how it actually how they felt about it, because I didn't stop at her. I continued, right? Because that was 2013 and we've been nonstop ever since.
Wow.
Because it's just that many kids out there that this is happening to.
Wow. When we talked before, right before the show, there's a Safer Youth Act that is being, legislation that was put forth in the state of New York. Can you talk about that?
Yes, so the Safer Youth Act comes from my niece Lanasia, who was 13 years old, that went missing and was murdered. Speeding up to 2020, we had a 12-year-old young boy, Jalen Griffin, who was said to have went to walk his dog and asked his mom, did she want something from the corner store? He went to the corner store August 4, 2020, and was never seen again. I encountered the family, from sharing, because there was some other people working, and I, give them their space when there's other people involved. And the family reached out and was like, why aren't you working this case? My coworker was like, why aren't you working this case? And Jalen Griffin lost his mother during this time, right before he was located murdered in an attic in South Buffalo, 5 miles away from his home, in a halfway house. And so the work, that's what we try to prevent.
Right.
And that act has to be in place in order for us to have faster response times, the visibility of current and clear photos of children, with the school board that surprisingly, takes pictures of the children every year, right? You send your kid to school, they get a school picture, they get a school ID. But when you go in your system and you're looking for a 12-year-old, you have a picture of a kindergartner there. How do you know if that's the only picture? Because what happens is when we go to look for kids, we get digitally altered photos. That's not their profile. That's not who they are. That's not the kid that you need to be aware that's missing when they are passing you in the community. And so all of these things come into play. From the bus aide, from the nurse, there's so many spaces where the ball gets dropped. And in order for us to do the Safer Youth Act, we need, people to participate by signing the petition so we can move it from state to federal.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just in Buffalo, New York. It's not just in New York State that this is happening. This is a worldwide crisis. And we need more people aware and involved.
How long did it take for authorities to find Jalen? You said he went missing in August 2020.
Yes. And he was located 10 days before his birthday, which he would have been 16. And
what year?
2024, April.
4 years?
Yes, the time span.
Oh my gosh. And
so 3.5 years, but, because he left at 12 and then didn't get found until he would have been turning 16. And so our last prayer circle was his memorial to get ready for his funeral.
Oh my gosh. And his mother died in the process of looking for her son. Wow, that is just excruciating. So you absolutely have your work cut out for you. Now, go ahead.
I just wanted to say it's so vital that we take these situations very serious. You know, you see people on posts on the news or however, whatever media outlet is put on, you know, minimizing the seriousness of this. A vulnerable person is vulnerable. You know, just because they're running, we don't know why they're running. So we can't say what they're running to or what they're running from.
Right.
It's our moral obligation to share until the parent, the caregiver, or law enforcement has located that person safe.
Absolutely. So, Bury the Violence, does it focus only on missing children, or is it all domestic? What else? What are your services that you offer?
We started out as, you know, locating missing children because that's what happened to us. We also encountered a murder. So the missing and murdered space is where we started. And then we would have people call us because somebody was murdered. They were never missing, but they wanted help with how to funeralize their loved one. So we also assisted with the burials. We advocated for funds to help people memorialize with headstones. We don't have funds for that, so we don't do that anymore. But I think, did 4 to 6 headstones, just, you know, to give dignity to the situation. So we advocate for families of missing and murdered, domestic violence, okay? And why domestic violence? Because some of these people are missing due to domestic situations. And they're murdered by their partner, husband. And then I have my own lived experience with domestic violence.
Wow.
So I know the system very well, unfortunately. And I was in at a time where I was able to learn. Instead of just getting services, I was able to learn how to parent. I was able to learn how to manage and sit with those things that I was going through, not just go through and, you know, my kids say push them to the side. But that's probably my, you know, way of moving through it. So we do domestic violence as well, safety and security for women.
Wow. And so if a woman is, or even a male, a man, if they're experiencing domestic violence, what services?
So, excuse me, with the domestic violence portion, we do absolutely have men. My godson was murdered by his child's mother, so we do service men as well. So what happens is they reach out, and no matter where they're at, we link them to the services that are in their area. We have learned that if you call 211 in your area, you won't get the services for Buffalo. You get the services for wherever you're calling from.
Wonderful.
That county, that town, whatever it is, that municipality, they have the access to whatever services are there. We tell them general ways to stay safe. We make sure they're safe before we even engage in a conversation. And then we link them to the resources, because what happens is we have so many people working in silos that nobody really knows what's right in front of them or how to even access what's right in front of them. And so we have our network of Unite Us, which bridges the gap within 48 states for us to be able to get the help that's needed.
So Unite Us is the name of an organization.
Yes.
So it's a national network for organizations like yours that can connect people to the resources that they need if they're in a dangerous situation.
Any situation.
Okay.
Needing a hot meal, may not have had a domestic or intimate partner violence situation, but we just limit ours to accessing the system through those spaces.
Sure.
So we don't take on so much more work.
Right. It's so interesting. I think we expect so much from law enforcement. We expect officers to be peacekeepers and counselors and, you know, these sources of information for resources. So it's so great that organizations like yours, like Bury the Violence, is a branch that people can reach out to when they need help. And oftentimes, you know, as much as we hate to admit it, the legal system isn't always the safest space. Right before the show, I was sharing with you, my grandmother, she got married very young. She was born in 1926 in Culpeper, Virginia, very rural area. And her husband, my grandmother was a victim of domestic violence. And so she was 8 months pregnant with her 5th child, and her husband broke her jaw and left her in the snow. So her neighbor had to pick her up, go to the nearest hospital, and the doctor had to reset her jaw, but because she was 8 months pregnant, couldn't give her any medicine. The doctor was so angry with what he had seen my grandmother go through that he said, "No worries, I will testify on your behalf. You don't have to do anything. What can I do to help you in the situation?" So my grandmother, she's 98. She just turned 98 actually, and she tells the story often. But she says when she went to court, the judge, his name was Roger Biggers, the judge said to her husband, "The next time you beat her, don't beat her so hard." My grandmother is 98. She has issues with, remembering things and forgetting things, but she never forgot that.
And that's the problem we still deal with today.
Yeah.
So one, we have to remember that law enforcement is here to protect and to serve, not to prevent. There's no precautionary measures. Usually the police report doesn't go very far if there's not actual physical damage to a person, right?
Wow.
Bodily harm. Then we have to remember, excuse me, where we're from, the officers right now are young enough to be my children. And my youngest is 15. So they can take that civil service exam and pass the test, they have a job. Not much life experience or skill set, and I'm not saying they're not educated.
Sure.
What I'm saying is they have to think about how to get out of a situation themselves. So we have to really use our own wisdom, knowledge, and the tools that we have around us to, navigate the system. With that being said, we have to remember that every option before calling the police might be options to get you out of the house into a safe space, like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, because we're well aware of the lack of care and compassion in those spaces where we really need help and are able to get it from law enforcement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing light to that there are options, and sometimes law enforcement isn't always the best option, but there are other organizations out there like yours. So please make sure you don't go anywhere. Stay right there. We'll continue our conversation with the Bury the Violence organization.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodsafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Here again, your host.
Back already?
Thank you so much for joining us back here on the Inside Scoop. I'm Alpha Woolen, your host, and we are going to continue our conversation with Karima Morris, the founder of Bury the Violence Foundation. So let's talk about why people stay in dangerous situations. It's so if you are adjacent or if you've never encountered someone in a situation like that, that's your first thought. Well, just leave. Well, you know, if it's dangerous, then just don't hang out with that person. But in your experience, why do you think people stay in those spaces?
We can never say why someone stays. There's such a wide, it's so much that happens in domestic violence. So you have social, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, emotional. You have all these levels of abuse, right? So some people are being abused and don't even know it. So what we may see as a red flag, and I'm telling you, this is what's going on and this is what I see, and often you hear, oh, you're just hating, or that's not what it is. Sometimes people are really oblivious. They don't understand they're in a very vulnerable or dangerous situation, because it doesn't always start with someone putting their hands on you. It starts when they attack you mentally, when they get you into a space to believe who they are or who they portray to be, and then they break you down. And so once you have been mentally withdrawn, and you have this is not your belief system, this is your support structure, you're isolated, you don't have your family, it's been so many situations that took place where you're all by yourself with this person, and on what level of abuse is it? Sometimes people really don't know until they're gone. And so, just for instance, say if it's financial abuse, that person has given you everything you know. You can't manage your money, you don't go to work, they make you believe this. And then here you are in a situation where you feel like if I leave, what's gonna happen? How am I gonna provide? Where am I gonna live? It literally takes about 7 times for someone really leaves.
Wow.
Because they do go back. And that's something that we have to understand. As a support system, you cannot force a person to leave. They have to want to leave, just like any dependencies, drug or anything like that, they keep going back. So we can't really say, why won't you just? Because everybody doesn't have the capacity to just leave.
Right. Wow. It takes, so you're saying on average, it takes someone attempting 7 times before they actually make the choice to not go back.
And then I don't want to be the spooky truth teller about how.
That's why we have this space, let's be honest.
How, you know, within a certain time frame of when you leave up into a year, that person can still be triggered. That was your abuser to cause you harm.
Wow.
That's why it's very vital that when you work with people, you have to have a trusted person, because you have to remain safe up until these time-proven, you know, experiences. It's almost like abusers have a manual on how to do this, right? They're so perfected in this craft of being an abuser that it's written that you have this window of opportunity to get away. You have this window of opportunity to get away safe. And if you go back within this time, they could kill you. And that's one of our biggest things is, you know, getting people out, keeping them safe, and keeping them in a space where they believe that they will live through this because they're here. And it's just so much to it. So you can't just expect a person to leave.
Sure.
And you can never minimize their experience. I could tell you right now that plucking my eyelashes hurts me so bad that I can't see, and that it hurts me deeply. But you could say, oh, well, I pluck my eyelashes and that doesn't work that way. And my eyes don't water for the next 10 days. That's my experience.
Sure.
So, you know, don't diminish it, don't minimize it. You have to allow people those opportunities to go through and say, hey, that really did hurt. Hey, that really happened. They have to be aware, alert, and receptive to what's going on.
Sure. I think that's something, and you're absolutely right. That's what we do as human beings. We look at someone else's situation and we judge or we determine what they should do based upon our own lived experiences.
Right.
But everyone doesn't have the same strength, everyone doesn't have the same intellect, everyone doesn't have the same outlook on life or approach. And I think that's something that young people are going through these days, especially what we call COVID kids.
Right.
You have kids that grew up, you know, between 2019 and 2020, 2021, being schooled, everything happening in the home. Presumably, if it was in a safe environment, it still had ramifications. But what about those who didn't grow up in safe environments? It's essentially the pandemic created little sociopaths that we're dealing with right now.
Well,
so what do you find in I guess for young people between like 16 and 20, what are you finding?
So again, I'm from Buffalo, New York, where we were the test theory of close the schools. Virginia was still up and moving around. We were already in lockdown, right? And our kids, I actually work in a school, in a space where I'm in guidance. So I see the root of the grades, the social, diminish and shut down. So from 17, 18, up until we got back into the schools, not only did the kids lose social skills, they lost friends. Communication is awkward. They don't have, everything was ripped away from them, and they're put on a laptop to go to school. So you want to have kids who aren't literal, that don't have technology literacy, if it makes sense.
Sure, yes.
I know it's a word for it,
That
but I
makes
can't think of
sense,
it right
yes.
now. So they're struggling with that alone.
Wow.
And then you have kids that just sit on a screen and they never come on. In the backdrop, you also have domestic violence going on. You have food that, some states didn't set up like we did, where you can go to school and pick up food X amount of time when they got to that. So you had kids being starved at home. You had domestic violence going on in the background. When I tell you it was complete chaos and total HE double hockey sticks that people were experiencing, and we're just thinking the kids in class. No. So that was a level of peak survivorhood where children didn't even know what was going on, less known paying attention to a lesson.
Wow.
And then you throw them back into a classroom. There was never a time where we phased out or phased in. It's just bloop, bloop.
Wow.
Deal with it. And there was no extra services put in the schools. And now look at the things that are happening. Even today, you have children, I call it the crash out culture, from the COVID kids.
Wow. And so do you think that opens the door for trafficking?
Oh, so you have children being groomed. You have peer trafficking.
Peer trafficking?
Yes.
Okay.
They're grooming each other.
Wow.
Remember when we were growing up and you had to have clearance and know who the parent was, and you knew something about these people?
Oh, my grandmother, you weren't going over nobody's house. After school, you come straight
Understood.
home. That's it.
And cousins either.
No.
Right?
Right, yes.
And so now you have children being groomed by their own peers.
Wow.
To go to the kickback, have some smoke, have a session, get away from this crazy reality of the parents who think they know everything, and they're just getting on the kid's nerve. And now the system has made it where the kids have more rights than the parent. Where I'm from, the children could change their name and their gender without the parents' permission, and it's nothing that they could do about it.
Wow.
At school, which is another legal documentation, right? So literally you have children running their own world, and then you have an adult sitting here trying to tell them what to do, and then you have the peers that know what's best.
Sure.
Because they survived the situation, and now they're the ones that's actually grooming and trafficking their own peers with these adults that have twisted situations.
Sure.
And the face of trafficking has changed immensely.
So you're not dealing with adults essentially, well, not only
It's
because
like
of
a
course
food chain
adults still,
almost.
yeah, adults are still a part of this, but now you've got 15-year-olds grooming other 15-year-olds to engage in illegal activities and sell their bodies. And so how do you mitigate that?
Let's not forget about the video games, right?
Sure.
Let's not forget about, I can't think of the correct terminology right now, but basically revenge porn.
Oh, right. I've heard of that. Mhm.
Where they're actually, it's the same physical reaction when they do this online, and they're using pictures and videos and things like that to get back at their peers. That's another form of manipulation and control. And
so that's a trend as well.
That's a huge trend.
Gosh, so that I'm sure that's contributing to teen suicide and
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And if you haven't noticed the numbers in that, because what doesn't make the news is suicides. You'll see a child that you knew wasn't sick, and then there's a funeral post or something, or rest in peace, and you're like, what happened? Because the mental health is being affected greatly.
Sure.
And the resolve of the crash out culture is just be on a t-shirt.
So do you have parents coming to like, Karima, I need help. How can I get through to my teenager? I don't want to lose them. I see that there's a change. How do you help them?
I often tell parents I am not, what do you call those? I don't know, like a mentor, because I'm a truth teller.
Oh, okay.
This is what's going on. Is that what you would? And the kids know better than I do what's really going on out here, right? And that's what makes it even more scary. So I have to learn what they know. I have to come to their space. I have to meet them where they're at, and then figure out how we can backtrack and say, well, tell me what you think about the things that you're going through, your experience, and tell me how that affects you. How did you really feel when this person violated you and you didn't know you were being violated? They used you, right? The parents have to consent to that, because I don't manage my own children the way I would, somebody else's child.
Sure.
So they have to be open to the reality of what's really going on out here before I can help them.
Wow. So please don't go anywhere as we continue our conversation. We're going to finish up our conversation with Bury the Violence founder, Karima Morris, and she's going to give us some ideas on what we can do to help this organization and some tools that we can implement in our own families and communities. We'll see you in 2 minutes.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya. You never mean you're well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about Rick Downright. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thank you so much for joining us back here on the Inside Scoop as we close out our conversation with Karima Morris, who is the founder of Bury the Violence. So when we left off, we were talking about just the trafficking has a different face. We used to think 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was just some, older, creepy guy, sitting at the park somewhere preying on children. But now you said there's peer-to-peer trafficking, and there is, the use of technology to bully young people. And then even just domestic violence looks different these days. It's not just husbands abusing their wives. These are men abusing men and women abusing other women. Yes. So everyone needs help these days. Yes. So I'm just so grateful for your organization, Bury the Violence. I know that it is based in Buffalo, New York, but you are establishing roots here in the DMV. So talk a bit about that and what we can expect, or how people, if people, do you go to schools, or what can we do to help you come into this area?
So the advantage is our COO lives right here in the DMV.
Wonderful.
And has already been in schools talking about these situations. And we're open to that, because ultimately, if we don't start right where the kids are and meet them where they're at, we lose the generation that's going through this. They're experiencing intimate partner and domestic violence, right? And so gratefully, we've been in the spaces already, and we're looking to expand and come through the DMV and just help where, coming into the schools is major, the classrooms, and we're open to just, bringing our expertise here.
Sure.
And luckily, it's already here.
Wonderful.
We just want to, make it more prominent and be more present.
Okay, so going into schools, going into other shelters, going into local jails or
churches.
Churches, okay.
Because churches are some of the hardest people to come out of religion and understand relationship.
Sure.
We have to really talk to our kids, and the old school way isn't working. So we have to meet them where they're at. So we do go into churches to be that safe space to show them too that we understand.
Sure. So what's some advice that you would give parents, saying it's different from the way it was when I was growing up. I want to reach my teenager, but I'm not successful. What advice would you give?
They honestly, and I'm a very foot and neck mother, they have to submit and meet their kids where they're at. They have to learn their language. They have to see how they move. I know that children in my day were taught to shut up and speak when spoken to, or only respond when asked a question. That does not work. We also had the thing where what goes on in our house stays in our house. And so that does not work, because little did we know, or did the parents know, it was going back to the schools anyway, and someone was being told. So I fight for your children so they could be free from what's silence culturally. And we have to be a safe space for our children, because we do not understand the torment that they are experiencing at school. Pay attention to what's going on in the schools. It's all over the TVs.
Sure. So there was something in Maryland recently, actually. There was a student who was hanged in the bathroom.
Yes, the young boy.
The young boy, exactly. And the school actually didn't inform the parents until later. Well, they weren't informed the same day. Right. So how do you advocate for parents that were just like, I cannot believe I was not told the same day? Like, how do you handle that?
And again, we trust law enforcement, like we trust the schools, right? You have to advocate for your child and fight for their lives, because we don't know who we are really leaving our kids in care of. We have to go in and ask questions, engage, and figure out where the school's at, because they're exhausted too. They need help too. And if we don't do it, nobody will. So we go in and advocate, we ask questions, we find out how the systems ran, how the structure is, who's really watching the kids, what's the ratio. There's so many questions and moving parts from and again, like I said, even with the Safer Youth Act, from the bus aide to the dental hygienist. We see so much and we don't pay attention to the signs. We have to be open and stop being so vested in everything else. Social media, put it down. Step into the real world, your kids. You know, every parent is not doing that. They're still worried about their things. We have to worry about our children. We have to focus, be aware, be present, and be alert. Because if not, we're missing what's right in front of us. And the kids will tell you what's going on. You just have to be present.
Wow. Do you find, what are some characteristics do you find that are shared amongst most young people that are struggling, that are in crisis? Is it isolation? Is it that they're acting out? Is it all of the above?
They disconnect socially, so however they may have been involved in some activities, because we think give them a million things to do, but they disengage. They may not be with the group. Like if they're going to dance, they may be off somewhere else to the side. It's small things. And then the phone, the device, because we think that we took a phone from them, that means absolutely nothing. The school gave them a device, right? And so they're so in tune to communicating through the internet, and they know how to get on Wi-Fi. We have to really pay attention to everything that's going on. They disconnect, sleeping habits, because if they're up at night on a device, they're tired. The way they eat, and the social pattern of who's around them, the friend groups and things like that, or who they're with in school. And ultimately, like parent-teacher conference, I was never big on it, but more now than ever, we need to know what's going on in the classrooms. We need to be in the classrooms. We need to be in communication with the teachers, because they see things that they let slide, and you wonder why it took a day for them to contact the parent, because it's normal.
Wow.
Because if my son acts up today, they want to give him a chance. And I don't need them to have the chance. I need to know what's going on.
Absolutely. I have a couple of friends that are teachers. I have at least 3 of them are teachers in DC schools. One of them is a principal, and I think she said one month there was a fight every day for a week, every day. And it's the girls, it's the boys. If they know that they can't fight on school grounds, which they know they can't, they're steps away from the metro, they'll fight there. It's just so much for even teachers to have to experience. So and then she's got to go home. She's got her own daughter. She's got to, you know, be right and be present for her. It's a lot.
Another thing is that social media is the biggest issue with our kids, right? Because they're on these platforms, they're going back and forth at each other. They want to fight, because it's the resolution to them, and they don't see any harm. But running to a fight with a camera can be the same way you lose your life, and you're not even in the fight.
Sure.
Because bullets don't have a name, and they don't have a face. So it's so many different moving parts to that. And again, they're tired too. So we have to become partners. We have to build coalitions with the educators. We have to know what's going on in the classroom, because there are fights. The kids know how to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Back home, they're going to the library.
To fight?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, the library. The library used to be where nerds hung out. Now it's, you know.
The brawls.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so speaking of support and establishing coalitions, what can people do to connect with Bury the Violence?
We're on social media as Bury the Violence, almost everywhere, on Facebook and Instagram. And then I do have a LinkedIn for Professional Connects under Karima Morris.
Okay.
And then you can go to our website.
And your website is Bury the Violence?
No, it's BTV.
Okay.
Buffalo.org.
Gotcha. btvbuffalo.org.
Yes.
But you did say that your COO is here in the DMV looking for opportunities to speak in schools and churches, etc.
Yes.
So for those that want to bring these resources to DC, Maryland, and Virginia, they can go to your website and connect with you, and then you can get them plugged in.
Yes, we're everywhere because we get caught all over. But yes, we are willing to come and meet them instead of doing virtual.
Sure, we absolutely need it. We really do. So, Karima, thank you so much for your work. I am hoping that our viewers will reach out to you and connect with you and help you establish roots here in the Washington, D.C. area. So now we're going to go to my favorite part of the show. Okay. I love every single show that I do. I really do. But I love giving viewers the opportunity to get to know our guests, especially if we talk about subjects that are a bit heavy, which we have. We've talked about trafficking and suicide and domestic violence. So I want people to know that you have a personal side, you have a soft side, you have a social side.
Yes.
So let's introduce that to our viewers.
Okay.
So let's see, one of the first questions I want to ask you is, for breakfast, are you a waffles person or are you a pancake person?
Pancakes. I'm a foodie.
Okay.
Yes, it's my safe space.
Okay, pancakes. I love waffle. I like a nice crunchy waffle.
And if it's soggy, it's ruined. So I'll stick with the pancakes.
Right, exactly. Okay, I can get with that. Okay, do you have a favorite song?
I can't say, well, I must admit, I drive everybody around me bananas because I have to be in worship. I have to have the music going all day long to keep me at bay and remember that I have to come back here because I don't want to stay here.
Right. So
it's pretty heavy.
So
I listen to worship music.
Okay, so that's your favorite genre, worship music. Gosh, okay. That's okay. Gosh, what is my favorite music genre? Probably 80s.
Okay.
Like 80s pop. It's probably my favorite music genre. Okay, if you were to go to a spa, what are the services that you like to utilize?
So I abuse the fact that we live right on the other side of Canada.
Okay.
I go on over the border, and I get yes.
Okay.
The spas are not Dubai, but they're getting there, right?
Okay.
So like I have to have a full hour. They do facials, body rubs, scrubs, wraps. I go for it all.
All the things.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we get the exchange rate.
Okay, fantastic. Are you someone that falls asleep at the spa?
I do. Gosh. I can't sit still too long.
Wow. Okay, I can't fall asleep at the spa. If I go to the spa, I might get a facial. I'll definitely get my nails done. And I like the rocks. I like the hot rocks. I do like that. Thank you so much for your time here, Karima.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, please make sure you visit BTV. BTVBuffalo.org to learn more about Bury the Violence. We'll see you next week here on The Inside Scoop.